Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever in the world you are, and a very warm welcome to this year's METS, the Maritime Energy Transition Summit. Thank you for tuning in today and engaging in the increasingly important and, let's face it, growingly complex topic of maritime decarbonization. The team here at DNV has worked tirelessly to create a program that provides you with practical, actionable insights for the decarbonization journey ahead. The theme this year is feasibility, and our goal is that by the end of the day, you will leave with a clearer perspective and greater confidence on how to tackle this challenge head on. But let's start with the elephant in the room. This time last year, many were anticipating progress towards a new era of global regulatory alignment. Expectations were high that the IMO's net zero framework would be adopted in October, providing clear direction for the industry. However, as we all know, the meeting was adjourned, reflecting the fact that no clear consensus had yet been reached. These discussions also reflected that broader truth. Geopolitical dynamics continue to shape negotiations, with countries and regions bringing different priorities, economic realities, and strategic interests to the table. While this has introduced renewed uncertainty around timelines, it also highlights the complexity of shaping global rules in a rapidly changing international landscape. Without a clear, globally aligned framework, the incentives for long-term planning weaken. This creates the risk of an uneven and fragmented transition, with regions and segments moving at different speeds. But regulation isn't the only force shaping the future. As we will see today, some cargo owners, those closest to the end consumer and most attuned to societal expectations, are stepping firmly into the driver's seat. Their ESG commitments, commercial requirements, and customer expectations are moving the market at a pace that in some cases exceeds regulatory ambition. The recent surge in orders for alternative fuel container vessels and the rise in partnerships between cargo owners, ship owners, and fuel suppliers makes this abundantly clear. This proves that momentum is already building despite regulatory uncertainty. The market is shifting, and those who are acting decisively now are defining the competitive landscape of the future. Those who hesitate risk falling behind, not only in emission reductions, but also in commercial readiness. So, where do we go from here? The answer lies in feasibility, practicality, and action, the guiding principle of this year's METS. Decarbonization requires decisive action grounded in solutions that work in the real world and under real constraints. Alternative fuels like biofuels, LNG, methanol, and ammonia are at the heart of this conversation. These are already being tested, piloted, and adopted across the industry at different paces. But let's acknowledge the reality. Significant barriers remain. Fuel availability, infrastructure readiness, safety standards, and cost implications are significant challenges. Yes, they are not insurmountable. With clear planning and strong cross-industry collaboration, they can be overcome. No single stakeholder can do this alone. Cargo owners, ship owners, fuel suppliers, and regulators must all work together to make these pathways viable. This also extends to energy efficiency. the second major pillar of maritime decarbonization. Hydrodynamic improvements, hull optimization, wind-assisted propulsion, and digital performance tools, to just name a few, are already widely available. Applied under the right conditions, they can reduce emissions, cut costs, and prepare vessels for future fuel transitions. These measures deliver results today, and they should be applied wherever feasible across the global fleet. There is still the debate over who will help foot the bill. The cost of these measures must be shared through the value chain. No single stakeholder can afford to cover all costs of the energy efficiency technology installation on board. But technology isn't alone enough. The real challenge, and often the hardest part, is the planning. Developing a decarbonization strategy means navigating a complex web of technical, financial, and operational considerations. This can, understandably, feel overwhelming. Every decision has ripple effects. Which fuels will be available at scale? How do retrofit options align with fleet renewal cycles? What safety protocols are needed? And how do we balance short-term costs with long-term competitiveness? A clear roadmap is essential, and this starts by defining fleet-level goals, identifying performance gaps, and setting milestones and KPIs to track progress. Leveraging digitalization and data-driven tools to optimize pathways and monitor progress is also increasingly important. And critically, strong change management embeds these actions into company culture, ensuring that decarbonization becomes a sustained priority, not just a short-term project. As we look ahead, let's not forget the people at the heart of the industry, our seafarers. They operate our vessels, manage our systems, and live with the consequences of every decision we make. Safety must remain at the center of the maritime energy transition. New fuels and technologies bring new risks, and it is our responsibility to ensure that crews are trained, protected, and supported every step of the way. The future of shipping will be shaped by the choices we make today. So let's lead the way and build the foundations for lasting progress that will be felt by generations to come. Thank you for joining us today. And with this, I would like to hand it back to you, Anna and Jason, in the studio. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed, Knut, for setting the stage so clearly and also for capturing both the urgency and the complexity of the moment we're all in. And with that, to all of you joining us online right now, a very warm welcome and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are based. Thank you for being with us and for joining the METS 2026, the Maritime Energy Transition Summit, brought to you by DNV. My name is Anna Moschner. I am heading communications and marketing for DNV Maritime, and it's my great pleasure and honor to be able to guide you through today's program. I'm not here all by myself in the studio in Hamburg, but I'm joined by a fantastic colleague and co-host.
Thank you, Anne. And I'm Jason Stefanatos, DNV's Global Decarbonization Director for Maritime, and I'm very glad to be here.
I'm very happy to have you because indeed you are the true expert in all things decarbonization. So I promise you, you will hear much more from Jason than from me throughout today's program. But to begin with, maybe I get to share a little bit because I want to give you a glimpse of what you're getting yourselves into over the coming few hours. Now, as Knut has highlighted, we're really kind of navigating a landscape that is marked by uncertainties. Already mentioned quite a few of those elements. Just think back to the adjourned IMO decision. Of course, we're also faced with diverging regional priorities and definitely mounting commercial pressures. But it's also a moment marked by momentum, if you like, because we do see progress in the industry. We do see cargo owners stepping up their game, stepping into the driver's seats. And of course, we also see collaboration and partnerships forming across the entire value chain. We do see real-life testing of available solutions. We see testing of alternative fuels. We do see implementation of energy efficiency solutions. So actually a lot is going on in the industry. And given that, we could have chosen to talk about everything and nothing, because decarbonization is just such a big topic. But as Knut has pointed out, we've decided on one overarching theme today. Today is really the big headline is feasibility. It's all about what can be done now. It's also about what matters most next, and maybe most importantly for you, how can you take decisions with confidence even as the regulatory and commercial landscape continues to shift. So hopefully this means that we will address some of your most immediate concerns and challenges related to your own decarbonization journeys. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, it's a lot of challenges that we will need to talk about. Jason, and maybe that's a question to you, because I know that's your bread and butter business. You speak to our customers on a daily basis, and that includes cargo owners, ship owners, yards, fleet managers. So I'd be curious to hear, if you had to pinpoint one key challenge coming up in those conversations, what would it be?
Well, I would say the dominant challenge is uncertainty at the moment. In the industry, we have lived through uncertainty before, but this has grown even further. We see the geopolitical dynamics are taking over technical and commercial discussions, and this leads to complex decision making, maybe even more than ever before. And this has led to a two-speed industry. We have the stakeholders who are decisively moving towards the net zero strategies, and at the same time we see stakeholders that adopt a wait-and-see approach until they have some clear signals from the fuel industry, from the fuel production, or from the regulatory side.
Great, and we will certainly try to address some of those challenges in the program today. Obviously, you know what's on the agenda. Anything you want to highlight that you feel people should pay special attention to today?
Well, that's quite hard to do. I mean, it's hard to pinpoint one, especially because of how fragmented the industry is at the moment. You have different stakeholders having different interests. And definitely we have cargo owners that set the pace and regulatory aspects that influence everyone. So that should resonate with everyone in terms of interest. But beyond that, different parts of today will have sparkle different interest on participants depending on where they stand on the transition, being operation, investment, or even strategic planning for the future.
Well said. And if in doubt, ladies and gentlemen, I recommend you just watch the whole show and just stay with us, because indeed, very interesting conversations and insights that we're going to share. So let me very quickly give you a rundown of the highlights on the agenda. So we will indeed get a cargo owner's perspective to kick us off. We will hear it from Alexandra Ebbinghaus of Shell Marine. We will also, of course, an all-time favorite, get a regulatory update by our Director Environment, Eirik Nyhus, will join us live in the studio to take us through latest developments and potentially the scenarios ahead of us on the regulatory landscape. And then we will get a perspective from China. Mr. Wang, who is the president of China Merchants Energy Shipping, will share a little bit about their decarbonization journey and the practical steps that they are taking to reach net zero. Very much looking forward to that. And then under the headline From Challenge to Change, we do want to talk about alternative fuels. Of course, as you well know, an important part of the mix, and certainly a kind of part of every scenario or potential decarbonization pathway, but alternative fuels come with a number of challenges and barriers, and we will try to address those. And then, of course, it's not just about fuels, as we also already heard from Knut, it's very much also about technologies available today. Energy efficiency solutions will be a big part of the program today, and actually Jason will guide us through that interesting slot. I'm very proud that we will be joined by a long list of DNV experts sharing their wisdom and expertise, but also I'm very happy that we could win over some industry-leading voices. We have a number of very interesting companies talking about their strategies and experiences in the market, including Hanwha Power Systems, Odfjell Management, Latsko Marine Management, and AET, to name but a few. And then finally, following the program here on the main stage, we've got hopefully something very engaging lined up for you. We have prepared a number of deep dive breakout sessions where you can engage with our experts, ask your questions, and really dive into some very interesting topics. And we will share more about how this works a little later on. So now you know exactly what's going to happen next over the next few hours. And to know what's going to happen next is indeed rare these days, because it's indeed very unpredictable given what's going on out there in the world. So Jason, maybe that's a challenge I want to put on you. If you maybe reflect on the year back, I think we've been in the studio like exactly a year ago for the production of METS 2025. But a lot has happened ever since, not just in the maritime industry, but in the world. If you had to sum up 2025 in one word, what would it be?
Well, in that case, definitely it would be roller coaster. This has been a roller coaster drive. We had a new framework being put on the table in April, only to see the delay of its implementation a few months later in October. And this, for the investors, both in terms of ship owners and fuel producers, this has sent mixed signals, and this has added to the uncertainty we discussed earlier. It has added quite significantly.
Right. You call it roller coaster, I call it crazy. Ladies and gentlemen, 2025 has been anything but normal. Let's remind ourselves of a very interesting year. Wow, what an overview, ladies and gentlemen. I think the headlines really captured nicely all the volatility and unpredictability we've been faced with and likely will be faced with for some time moving forward. And I think it's also been a great reminder of the pressure that all of you are under to take decisions when the grounds keep shifting. Some might say the ground keeps shaking. Okay, let's keep that topic in mind, uncertainty, when now listening into the next conversation. We've already spoken about the role of the cargo owners, and I believe, Jason, you had the chance recently to speak to a cargo owner. You had a chance to talk to Alexandra Ebbinghaus of Shell Marine.
Yes, exactly. She could not join us live today due to practical reasons, but I'm very glad I had the chance to have a very interesting discussion with her on how a cargo owner looks at the maritime transition at the moment.
Sounds very interesting. So let's listen in.
Hello. Cargo owners are emerging as a powerful force in driving maritime decarbonization, especially in regulatory timelines, as regulatory timelines like IMO's Net Zero Framework face delays. And while the sector waits for a global alignment, market expectations, ESG requirements, and stakeholder pressure are pushing cargo owners to take proactive steps. By leveraging their influence over procurement, contracting, and supply chain transparency, the cargo owners can accelerate emission reductions and set the new standards for environmental performance across the industry. In this session, we will explore the diverse behavior among cargo owners, spanning from the ones that are leading with ambition commitments up to the others who are still finding their footing. We will highlight the practical actions that cargo owners are taking today, embedding emissions clauses in contracts, demanding verified data, piloting technologies and alternative fuel strategies, and all those to meet the expectations and avoid future cost shocks, demonstrating at the same time that the significant impact can be achieved by doing actions on the maritime decarbonization journey. And for this, I'm quite excited and honored to have with me Dr. Alexandra Ebbinghaus, who is GM Decarbonization for Shell Marine. Alexandra, a big welcome and a big thank you for being here.
Thank you, Jason, for the invitation to join the DNV Maritime Energy Transition Summit. As Jason said, my name is Alexandra Ebbinghaus. I'm the General Manager for Decarbonization in Shell Marine. So Shell Marine is a group in Shell that is supplying fuels and lubricants to the shipping sector. And my specific interest is to help customers to meet their decarbonization targets.
Thank you very much, Alexandra. And with this, I will start with the first question. Last year, we saw the delay from IMO's Net Zero Framework. And while the other drivers for decarbonization remain, so we still have regional regulations, the Fuel EU and the ETS, we have ESG commercial requirements. Do you think that cargo owners will keep setting the requirements? And currently, what do you see are the main incentives and drivers for a cargo owner?
I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, for shipping companies, it remains difficult and arguable is even today more difficult to act due to the delays in the regulatory framework and also, of course, a very volatile external environment. However, sustainability pressures and aspiration to reduce greenhouse gas emissions are not going away. And shipping is an industry with assets which are operating for decades, and this cannot afford to take a short-term view. But when you look at cargo owners, they may also face regulatory mandates such as being in scope for the EU ETS or CBAM, EU's policy tool for fair carbon emission pricing, and GHG reporting requirements. Cargo owners may have their own set of GHG reduction targets, and their customers may also be looking for lower emission products. So we are observing an increased interest of cargo owners to know their Scope 3 emissions from transport. But we should also not kid ourselves. For most cargo owners, shipping, being such an energy efficient form of transport, will represent only a small element of their total emissions. But of course, that doesn't mean that they are immaterial. So what we see is really ship owners and cargo owners have a lot in common. They're facing existing, developing regulatory mandates, want to meet own ambitions, and meet customer expectation. And of course, the other common aspect or challenge is that the willingness to pay for lower greenhouse gas emissions is very likely quite limited.
That is quite interesting insights. And I want to touch on, you mentioned both cargo owners and ship owners. And I think this is quite important because we see that the supply and the value chain is quite long. So we need to make sure we have everyone on board. So in the past, the maritime industry was not that open for cooperation, but we see this changing now. And I would like to ask you, how important do you see partnerships with ship owners, fuel suppliers, technology providers? How important do you see them being for enabling the cargo owners to implement all the strategies they have in mind in an effective way? And are there any specific collaboration models that you see working well?
I mean, implementing decarbonization strategy is not easy. I mean, you have constraints across, including affordability, availability, competitive pressures. So I do believe that you have to work together as an ecosystem. So really to address the challenge of what can be done now as not, together as one actor alone cannot be successful. So you really need to first know what is the size of your problem, i.e. what are your emissions, and then consider options on how to address those, which is where collaborations is most important. So when you look at the need for agreed methodologies to determine transport emissions, you think it's easy, but you need to address how to account for ballast voyages, what emission factors to use. We need to have comparable data to be shared. And this is the first start of collaboration. Industry groups like Clean Cargo and the Sea Cargo Charter are examples of setting segment-specific guidances on how to report the emissions. But once the cargo owner knows, how do you then actually provide a lower emissions transport offer? And for that, I really have one word, which is insetting, or SWE, book and claim. So the concept has been around for quite a bit, for several years yet, but let me just explain it briefly. So insetting or book and claim is where a shipping company generates low emission attributes by using biofuels in their fleet, and then makes those available to cargo owners who are looking for emission attributes to reduce their emissions, but who do not have the cargo on the vessel using the biofuel. So in essence, a shipping company banks carbon savings and applies those to the transport of cargo, where the cargo owner is prepared to pay for the emissions reductions. As mentioned, the concept has been around for several years, but the ecosystem around is also developing and maturing, and you could say it's becoming more standardized because of collaboration, because actors across the value chain are working together to make it happen. So an example, the Roundtable for Sustainable Biomaterials, RSB, is looking at certification for book and claim. Platforms like 123 Carbon offers verification management allocation services. Catalyst, the book and claim registry launched by the Merck's McKinney Møller Center for Zero Carbon Shipping and RMI, is aiming to connect shipping companies and cargo owners. Zember, the Zero Emission Maritime Buyer Alliance, is a prominent example of an initiative that helps cargo owners access book and claim competitively. But it is also an example on how the cargo owners help both the fuel suppliers and the ship owners to progress. Cargo owners don't control the ships, the fuels, or onboard technology, but they do control demand, contracts, and the long-term signaling for change. So by creating the volumes demand and long-term contracts, they help the shipping company to justify the long-term investment on new builds, retrofits, but they also help the fuel suppliers to commit to long-term scaled productions. So Zember is a very good example where this is happening today. An example of a partnership between fuel supplier, ship owner, cargo owner, technology provider, with a long-term vision and commitment, which is then the key to further success.
That is quite interesting. We have had the same outcome in our last year's maritime forecast, where we identified the importance of the flexible chains of custody. This is not only for faster adoption of fuels, but also for more efficient, from an energy efficiency point of view, bunkering operation. And this also leads me to my last question for today. We have a lot of ship owners participants today. So I would like to also ask you something from their eyes. We know that decarbonization is not easy. So we would like to hear from you, what do you see as some of the key challenges that ship owners face as they try to balance commercial objectives with sustainability goals? And how can the industry work together to address these obstacles?
Yeah, I mean, if you're just looking in the short term, you can, any ship owner can purchase biofuels like FAME to provide the lower greenhouse gas emissions, which, may be requested by the cargo owner. But that is a very short-term solution, as conventional vessels are limited to the use of fuel oil, and there's no future proving there because there's a limited supply of FAME and other drop-in fuels. But on the other hand, if you're investing in new builds with dual fuel capability to provide more fuel optionality for the future, you will significantly increase the capex of the vessel. Now, if you're thinking about in the absence of global regulation today, at least, the short-term benefit of a dual fuel vessel is quite uncertain. Even if there tends to be an agreement that during the lifetime of that vessel, it will be subject to a net zero framework. So really the question should be, what can be done to reduce the uncertainty that investing in dual fuel capability is the right choice today? And my answer would be, you have to look at all potential benefits and see how the picture changes when these are all put together or stacked. So a dual fuel vessel may be more attractive proposal to lenders, making the best use of existing regulations like EU ETS and FuelEU Maritime. If you today have a two-stroke dual fuel LNG vessel with operations in Europe, you'd already have an additional income stream. Then we, as mentioned before, there's a potential of offering environmental attributes to cargo owners via insetting. And, it doesn't have to be the cargo owner of your vessel. That's the attractiveness of insetting. And then a better IMO CII rating, which could attract further charterers. The other aspect is choosing the lowest cost option. So LNG dual fuel vessels are today advantaged on the total cost of ownership, as LNG as a fossil fuel helps with regulatory compliance, but it's a fossil fuel, so it's also attractive on a fuel cost basis. So just recently I heard of a company where the sustainability team is more profitable than the freight trading team. I mean, I would definitely say this is an outlier, but there is an opportunity space where cargo owners are making the difference to the business case for ship owners to invest in the long-term decarbonization opportunities. So acting now will help both the ship and the cargo owner to be a better place when, and I say when and not if, a global net zero framework becomes reality.
That has been incredibly insightful, not only for me, I'm sure for everyone participating in METS. It has been a big honor to have you here, Alexandra, and I would like to thank you very much for a great discussion and for offering such valuable cargo owners' perspectives.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you. And now back to the studio.
A very interesting conversation indeed. A big thank you to Alexandra also from my side, and a big thank you to you for facilitating this interesting conversation. Jason, we just heard Alexandra talk about the importance of collaboration across the ecosystem, and she also addressed the growing importance of mechanisms like insetting, like book and claim. If I may, building on that, from your perspective, what's the biggest practical step that cargo owners and ship owners could or should be taking together to help us move forward?
Yeah, I think it's collaboration and transparency. We have been working on those the past years, and we need to ensure that we keep on the track if we want to have actual emissions reduction. And this comes from the fact that we have said many times that ship owners are not alone here. We need to engage all the stakeholders across the entire value chain, and this is where we should start in practical means.
Thank you very much for that reflection, and I'm sure we'll come back to that a little later as well. Okay, everybody, now after looking at the cargo owner's perspective, let's now zoom out and talk about the regulatory side of the story, an area that has been anything but stable over the past year, right, Eric?
It's been exciting.
It's been exciting. Well, that's one way to put it, isn't it? Ladies and gentlemen, with us live in the studio is our Director Environment, Eric Nuis. Thank you for joining us again. Always a pleasure to have you. And I'll leave the floor to you in a minute to give us, all things regulation in a nutshell. But if I may ask you a very personal question right now, given that it's been exciting, How many sleepless nights did you have in 2025, or have you stopped counting?
Well, I've been in recovery. All good now, so I'm ready for whatever 26 may bring.
Fantastic. You certainly look ready, so I'll leave the floor to you. Please, Eirik.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here. So this is your 10 minutes of regulations, where I will, unsurprisingly, I guess, try to give you a glimpse into the state of play of greenhouse gas regulations. And equally unsurprising, the focus will be on the International Maritime Organization and the efforts to create a global framework for greenhouse gas emissions. Now, if you are the least bit interested in this topic, and I trust you are being part of this event, and if you haven't been living in a cave for the last 3 months, you will know that the adoption of the new regulations at the extraordinary session of the MEPC back in October didn't happen. Instead, the meeting was adjourned for a year. Now, some describe this as IMO hitting a brick wall. Some describe it as hitting a speed bump. Personally, I think of it more as a one-year coffee break. Irrespective, it was an unexpected gut punch for many involved. So, what are the regulations in question? What happened? And not least, what happens now? I'll start with a bit of history. And no worries, I'll keep it short and sweet, given the complexity of the matter. Now, back in 2023, the IMO adopted a revision of its 2018 greenhouse gas strategy. It contained many things, but most importantly, it set a target of shipping achieving full decarbonization by or around 2050. Getting to this point has taken the IMO many years of careful negotiations. And it is significant that the 2023 agreement actually was reached with no one formally reserving their positions. In essence, despite many concerns, everyone was on board, and I do not think that there is anyone at the time who thought that this would be cheap or easy. Nevertheless, fast forward to spring 2025, IMO has hammered out its regulatory response to the strategy, the so-called Net Zero Framework, NZF, between friends. It has a technical and an economic element, and it's a very, very finely balanced compromise. It was approved. There were objections. There were voices being raised against it. There was even a vote being called by a group of countries. And this was kind of a sign of things to come, maybe. But nevertheless, we had the vote, it was approved, and we went on. Because the vote was lost. Fast forward to yet another 6 months, and we were back in London for the formal adoption of the NZF. The United States objected strongly to it in general, but in particular to the revenue collection and disbursement mechanism, and an already intense pressure mechanism ramped up even further. Now, spearheaded by the US, but also backed by others, many former NZF supporters were silenced, didn't dare to speak up. And on a very turbulent last day of the meeting, a vote for adjournment of the meeting was called by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and it was narrowly won. And so we're now on that extended coffee break. What happens next? I think that's the key question here, right? I want to stress that formally speaking, the NZF, as approved in the spring of 2025, is very much alive, and that the adoption process, again, formally speaking, is set to continue in November 2026. But geopolitics being what they are, there are no reasons to expect the opponents of the NZF to shift their positions or their approach to negotiations by November this year. And therefore, repeating the same process with the same proposal under the same circumstances while hoping for a different outcome is likely not the best strategy. And that brings us to scenarios. Diplomacy is ongoing. Parties are looking into options. Countries are discussing in the run-up to the meeting in November. But cards are being held pretty tightly, and not much solid information is leaking, to be honest. So what follows are really my musings on possible ways forward for the greenhouse gas framework. So scenarios. Scenario 1. NZF supporters try to overcome the US opposition by providing diplomatic surety and cover to those countries that are being pressured. in essence, trying to push the NZF through the way it is. I think this is a high-stakes approach, high risk, not very likely to succeed, though there may be parties thinking it's worth a shot. Again, I think that is an unlikely one. Which brings us to scenario 2. You restructure the existing proposal, you put forward only the technical element, i.e. the fuel intensity regulation that mandates progressively lower greenhouse gas emissions over time, and you postpone or remove the economic element, which is a greenhouse gas emission pricing mechanism. In my view, the opposition to any economic element, whether deferred or delayed, is going to be so strong that only a purely technical regulation really has any chance of going forward under that scenario. But it might be viable. It might be viable because if all relevant alternative fuel options are on the table, it could contain incentives for a large cross-section of countries around the world. And in theory, if all the stars align, this could lead to adoption in November this year. But again, all the stars would need to align, and I think it's a challenge for that to happen. Scenario 3. The NZF, whatever is put forward, gets rejected, either at the vote this fall or by subsequent objections from flag states representing sufficient tonnage. This may then at some point be followed by a reset and an attempt to design something totally new. And while possible, my hunch is that in that case, a reset will take quite a while, which probably brings us well into the 2030s, if anything moves forward at all in that space. So again, 3 broad scenarios. These are high-level musings from myself. It's not hard to come up with other scenarios, permutations, subsets, what have you, or simply tell me I'm barking up the wrong tree. Also totally viable. But the one thing I believe is that in all of these cases, the timeline has really been pushed significantly back. Despite it being theoretically possible to have something in place in November 2028, I think the issues to be solved are so thorny that the IMO will need more time. And that's, of course, if an outcome can be negotiated at all. So to me, entry into force of some version of the regulation in 2029 is optimistic. 2030 is more likely, and I would not be shocked to see things slide even further. What does this mean for decarbonization in general and regulations specifically? Critically, in no way do I see this as the end of maritime decarbonization. There are other drivers, societal, commercial, technical, and indeed regulatory ones, that will continue to drive decarbonization efforts. But if the IMO fails, it'll likely happen in a much more fragmented and haphazard way at a slower pace. And a level playing field built on global common rules and regulations, that will be replaced by a patchwork approach with all the additional complexities that entails. Case in point, the EU regulations, ETS and Fuel EU Maritime, both have clauses mandating reviews in 2026 and 2027. There were expectations, hopes, that the EU would, of course, look at those reviews in the light of an IMO outcome. Now, the situation being what it is, it can only be expected that the EU will be cautious in trying to align with the IMO. Indeed, if the IMO does not manage to land anything, it would not surprise me to see an eventual tightening of the EU regulations, even with all the ongoing work in the EU pertaining to competitiveness. Another example, the UK. The UK is rolling domestic shipping into its own ETS on July 1st this year, and that also includes port calls from international shipping. And it is likely to be aligning with the EU later, in 2028. And while the UK government says it will also take IMO outcomes into account, at present there is little incentive for them to roll back on their national initiatives. And I could go on. There are other smaller countries, Djibouti, Gabon are 2 examples with their own ETS systems. We know other countries are also looking into that option if the IMO doesn't manage to land anything. And so that brings us again back to the IMO and a scenario 4, if you will. Because in case the IMO greenhouse gas regulations end up going nowhere, I would not be shocked to see proposals to tighten the existing short-term regulations, the ones that already are on the books. This means that I see distinct possibilities of an EDI phase 4, an EEXI phase 4, a tightened SEMP, and a CII changed to well-to-wake with robust enforcement. Some of these are already under review, and going this route as a potential scenario 4 is not at all inconceivable if we have failure on all other channels. So wrapping it all up, I just want to say that we live in turbulent times, as has been said by many. Geopolitics is having an unprecedented impact on the work at the IMO, and predictions as to what the future holds, they are a dime a dozen. So while I hope you've been a bit enlightened over the last minutes, or at least have had some food for thought, I want to leave you with a relevant quote by the famous screenwriter and novelist William Goldman. He reflected on the inability of anyone in Hollywood to predict which movies would actually make money, which seems to me a little bit like trying to predict what's going to happen at the IMO these days. He simply had this to say: nobody knows anything. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Eirik. Enlightening and entertaining as ever. I would challenge you on that last quote there. I mean, working in D&V with some of the brightest minds I've ever met, I wouldn't subscribe to that. But let's not go there. Two follow-up questions from my side, if I may. I mean, you've addressed it a little bit, but I'm just curious, your personal opinion. Should we now be optimistic or indeed cautious about an IMO decision kind of happening in the next year?
Cautiously optimistic, maybe?
Maybe, yeah.
No, I think there is a real possibility of actually seeing something go forward. It will be different, in my estimation, from what was on the books, but I have hopes, and I struggle to use the word expectations, but I think it's a distinct possibility that we can land an agreement. If we'll land it this year, or if we need more time, that's a bit different story, but I think the IMO is not dead in this space.
That's good to hear, I think, and cautiously optimistic then it will be. Okay, a final question from my side. Now, if the global timeline keeps slipping, if we understood is a definite possibility, what then is maybe the one thing that you recommend to industry players to prepare for?
Think contingencies. I mean, most industry players should have a decarbon plan already, at least looking at what are the options for their fleets given various scenarios. Reconsider that in light of what the outcomes are. Think about probabilities, think about what that means for you, and also don't forget that aspect of what happens if we get the regional regulations really picking up steam. It's complex, but I think it's necessary.
And I'd add to that, talk to your D&V experts, and then we hopefully will help you figure it out moving forward. Thank you so much, Eirik. We will now have to close our regulations part, because now we want to talk about, let's say, the practical side of the transition. And for this, we will now move on to a company that's been very clear about having a structured and long-term decarbonization plan. We're talking about China Merchants Energy Shipping, CMES. And we were curious to learn from them what this looks like on the inside. And for the next slot, I'm very happy to hand it over to my dear colleague, Rachel Gao in Shanghai, speaking to Mr. Wang Yongxin, president of CMES, about how they are turning long-term decarbonization strategies into day-to-day decisions. Let's listen in.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having us. The maritime industry is undergoing a significant transformation with the aim of achieving net zero emissions by the middle of this century, driven by evolving regulations and increasing commercial pressure. This represents both a major challenge and a significant opportunity. But how can we turn compliance into a competitive advantage? To help answer this important question and support the maritime energy transition, DNV and the World Maritime Merchants Forum ESG team last November collaborated to publish the Net Zero Guide, Practical Approaches for Global Shipping Companies. This guide provides a structured roadmap for decarbonization, offering actionable steps for ship owners to align operational and investment decisions with international and regional regulations. It addresses the complexity and cost of compliance, outlines cost-effective actions such as energy efficiency upgrades, phased fuel transition, and targeted fleet renewal, or retrofits, and emphasizes embedding decarbonization into core business strategies. The guide also highlights the importance of competence development, change management, and leveraging partnerships across the value chain to enhance transparency and unlock long-term efficiencies. I am very pleased to be joined today by Mr. Wang Yongxin, the president of China Merchants Energy Shipping, in short CMES, who will help us to understand how these principles translate into practical steps and how decarbonization can become a source of resilience and commercial value. Good afternoon, Mr. Wang. Welcome and thank you for joining us today to share your insights.
Thank you for the invitation. It is an honor to be here with industry leaders and experts. Decarbonization is reshaping the industry. It is great to have this platform for deep dialogue.
Let's start with the big picture. The push towards net zero is reshaping almost every part of global shipping, and companies are navigating the fast-moving mix of regulations and commercial expectations. How are evolving regulatory frameworks and commercial pressure shaping the maritime industry's approach to decarbonization? Based on CMES experience developing the net zero guide, what key insights and practical steps can companies take to stay ahead of these changes?
That's a great place to start. What we are seeing across the industry is that the shift towards decarbonization is speeding up. Regulatory requirements and commercial expectations evolve at the same time. Global policies such as the EMO's strengthened GHG strategy and regional mechanisms like the EU ETS and the FUU Maritime are introducing new obligations. These requirements directly influence operational planning and cost structures. Also, charterers, cargo owners, and financiers are raising expectations around carbon performance. Decarbonization is no longer a compliance exercise. It has become a strategic driver of long-term competitiveness. Through our exchanges with the industry peers, we learned that many companies recognize the urgency but lack a clear, actionable roadmap. Our vision is that effective transition planning must be begin with a precise review of regulatory risk in two directions: fleet constructions and operational management. Companies need to plan ahead based on how new rules will impact their future fleet and business models. They must advance short-term adjustment while introducing alternative fuels and new technology in phases within their long-term planning. By doing so, companies can not only meet regulatory requirements, but also strengthen their competitive position in a market where sustainability increasingly drives commercial decisions.
Thank you, Mr. Wang. That really helps set the scene. It's clear that while the pressure to act is increasing, there's also a real opportunity for companies that take a structured, forward-looking approach. Let's build on that and look at how this translates into concrete planning across the fleet. Many companies tell us they understand what they need to do, but struggle with how to break it down into manageable steps. With that in mind, what would you say are the most effective ways for shipping companies to assess their current emissions profile and translate decarbonization objectives into actionable strategies across short, medium, and long-term horizons?
From our experience, the most effective approach is to view decarbonization through a full life cycle lens and include it into fleet development. from the earliest design stage to daily operations. At the CMES, we have been practicing this approach in recent years by integrating lifecycle decarbonization planning into our building, retrofit, and commercial management projects. This allows each vessel to start with carbon tracking and continue to optimize it throughout its operational life. In short term, a structured management framework, we would start with using high-quality data and scenario analysis to review current emissions profile. From there, we develop a phased roadmap that spans short, medium, and long-term scale. In the short term, focus on operational improvements and energy-saving devices that deliver quick wins. Medium-term strategy should include preparing for fuel flexibility and retrofits, while long-term plans align fleet renewal with life cycle decarbonization goals. Governance is critical. Set clear KPIs, monitor progress, and adjust as regulations and technologies evolve. This structured approach ensures that investments are cost-effective, compliance is maintained, and the fleet remain competitive in a fast-changing environment.
That is a great breakdown, and I think many in the audience will appreciate how you've linked day-to-day initiatives with long-term fleet strategy. Now, of course, even the best plan needs practical actions behind it. So let's talk about what can be done right now with today's technology. There's often a perception that meaningful decarbonization requires major fuel shifts, but in reality, a lot can be achieved through smarter operations and targeted upgrades. So, which operational measures and technical upgrades offer the greatest potential for immediate efficiency gains? And what additional technologies will be key to accelerating fleet decarbonization?
Good question. And that's why we are working to bring shipping peers together through activities like this to facilitate the exchange among global shipping peers. We believe there are many things that company can do right now. These actions are practical, quick to start, and directly reduce costs under requirements like the EU ETS. On the technical side, upgrades such as energy-saving devices offer strong returns, especially when timed with scheduled maintenance. Companies should prioritize measures based on cost and regulatory impact, starting with those that deliver the greatest reduction in carbon intensity and compliance costs. So found that increasingly digitalization and intelligent fleet management systems are becoming critical enablers. High-quality emissions monitoring, AI-supported voyage optimization, and digital twins allows companies to make more accurate, real-time decisions. This technology also creates the data foundation needed for future fuel transition and regulatory compliance. By combining operational management, planned technical upgrades, and advanced digital tools, shipping company can achieve meaningful progress to decarbonization without waiting for major fuel transitions.
Interesting points. What really stands out is how much progress is possible using solutions that are already available, especially when digital tools are integrated in a thoughtful way. And that brings us naturally to the future. Because while companies work on today's improvements, they also need to be ready for what's coming next. Looking ahead, technologies, views, and regulatory expectations will all continue to evolve, sometimes faster than expected. What are the key priorities for shipping companies as they navigate to the next phase of the net zero transition? And what practical advice would you offer to the industry?
Looking ahead, I think it is clear to all of us that the pace of changing in regulations, technologies, and market expectations will only speed up. For shipping companies, the next phase of the net zero transition will require not only technical solutions, but also strong organizational capability. As new digital systems, alternative fuels, and smart technologies become more widely adopted, companies will face new operational and safety challenges, ranging from data reliability to crew readiness. My core message is this: invest in your people as much as you will invest in your ships. Strengthen capability across operations, technical management, and commercial teams so they can manage new compliance demands and operate a more complex fleet with confidence. At the same time, no company can transition alone. Industry-wide collaboration, sharing lessons, and partnering across the value chain is critical to scaling results and reducing uncertainty. The priority now is clear: building capability, adapt new technology, and collaborate with the value chain. Companies that do this will not only stay compliant, they will lead in a market where performance, safety, and sustainability are defining competitiveness.
Thank you, Mr. Wang. Your insights really highlight that decarbonization is not just a technical challenge, but an organizational journey, one that rewards companies that build capability, collaborate widely, and stay agile as the landscape changes.
Thank you for your invitation. I'm glad to share my opinions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you also from my side to Mr. Wang for sharing his views, and of course also to Rachel for facilitating this very interesting exchange. And I think what we've just heard really underlines how interconnected this decarbonization challenge truly is. And I did take a note because there were a few quotes that I really liked. I think Mr. Wang reminded us very importantly that you must invest in your people as much as you invest in your fleet. I think that's crucially important because the transition, of course, is not only about technologies, it's also about capabilities. It's about culture and collaboration. And on the note of collaboration, Mr. Wang also stressed how important it is to collaborate across the entire value chain. And that is crucially important to see real progress. And that is certainly also true when looking at our next topic, because of course also the implementation of alternative fuels will only happen and scale up if people across the value chain collaborate, pilot and test the new solutions. So next up, a slot on alternative fuels, because of course alternative fuels do play a pivotal role in reaching net zero. In no matter what scenario or pathway, one way or the other, we will not get around alternative fuels. But then again, they do come with quite a few challenges, right, Jason?
Yes, exactly. Thank you, Anne. So we see net zero being an ambition for many in the industry, and there are a lot of ways to go there, depending on the ship type, size, age, and trade route. And we have many tools in our toolbox. We have low carbon to zero carbon fuels, biofuels, and energy efficiency, which has been something that we work in our industry for years or even decades. And then we have the future and the more long-term solutions like onboard carbon capture, fuel cells, and nuclear, which has been turning a lot of eyes the past few months. But alternative fuels, they have been a core part of the decarbonization journey. And still, the key question remains, what makes each fuel feasible? So in this session, we will explore the landscape of the alternative fuels today, and we will try to unpack the factors that determine what makes each fuel be capable of having a scale-up uptake. And today, we will look in the uptake of the alternative fuels in the global fleet, which is quite strong, but far away from being uniform in all segments. And we will also see the commercial aspects that really drive this transition. Today, we talk about feasibility, and we need to understand what makes each fuel work. So when it comes to biofuels, they are quite on track. We have been using biofuels for quite a few years now, and last year we saw a big surge of use when we had FuelEU kicking in, and the most popular solution that we see for compliance with FuelEU is burning biofuel and pooling across the fleet. So the question on biofuels now is mainly about price and availability. But for the other fuels, we still have a lot of challenges to overcome before we have wider adoption. And today, that's why we will focus on the 4 most popular fuel solutions. We have LNG and bio-LNG, methanol, and accompanied, of course, by ethanol, ammonia, and hydrogen. And it is already clear that the global fleet is able to burn alternative fuels, and this will help and support the industry into achieving the decarbonization targets. If you look at the numbers behind me, they come from our platform, the Alternative Fuels Insight platform. This is the most concise industry platform that monitors alternative fuel development, both in terms of land, but also on the vessels. And you can see that based on GT, the existing fleet is capable of burning alternative fuels at a 9.6%. And when we go to the order book, we climb up to the whopping 45%, again based on GT. These are quite impressive numbers, and if you add them in total, it shows that in a few years, the global fleet will be able to burn approximately 50 million tons equivalent fuel oil out of the roughly 280 tons that we burn globally. In other words, the shipping industry is ready and has been technically prepared to burn the fuels. The real question now is whether this fuel will be available in sufficient quantities. And we need to scale up fuel production, both in terms of volume, but also in terms of geographical distribution, if we want to achieve the transition in the next years. Beyond availability and cost, we also have other technical challenges to overcome when it comes to the fuels. So that's why a few years ago, we had a very comprehensive study on all fuels, attributing all aspects of the fuels, and we ended up with what we call barrier dashboards, which are some dashboards that very visually illustrate the challenges and the status of each fuel. And what we have done is we have analyzed the fuels from multiple dimensions under 3 major categories: ship and technology, fuel and infrastructure, and the recently added fuel ecosystem. And beyond these 3 categories, we have 10 barriers that cover safety, technological maturity, infrastructure readiness, and, of course, regulatory alignment. And this gives us a 360 degrees view, a very clear, a very structured view of what are the hurdles and the opportunities of each of the fuels. And we are now updating these dashboards with the latest progress made since when we made the first dashboard. And we have been doing that under the work of a long list of white papers focused on each fuel. And for the remainder of this session, the lead authors of these papers and experts, global experts on their respective fuels, will take us through these developments. Their goal is to unpack what makes each fuel feasible. And they will do it by identifying what are the real challenges, but also demonstrating real-life examples and showing what makes a business case be positive for each fuel.
LNG and its low GHG alternatives, biomethane and e-methane, offer a promising pathway for both short-term and long-term emissions reductions. However, while LNG-capable vessels and bunkering infrastructure are expanding quickly, the scaling of biomethane and e-methane is constrained by upstream fuel production. LNG has been a well-established marine fuel for several decades. Today, there are more than 800 LNG-capable ships operating worldwide, and more than 600 in the order book, and that's not even counting LNG carriers. LNG can improve air quality and can lower a ship's GHG emissions, but it is still a fossil fuel with notable well-to-wake emissions. Even so, it offers a pathway towards liquefied biomethane and e-methane, fuels which can be carbon neutral when produced from sustainable sources. Biomethane and e-methane offer a strong route towards net zero emissions for LNG-capable ships, since they can be burned on board without technical modifications. Both fuels can leverage existing natural gas infrastructure, using distribution pipelines when gaseous, and LNG bunkering facilities and onshore storage tanks when liquefied. Both fuels can be produced with very low GHG emissions, e-methane from renewable electricity and sustainable CO2, and biomethane from sustainable biomass. When sourced from manure, biomethane can even deliver negative GHG intensity by preventing methane from escaping into the atmosphere.
Several key challenges must be addressed before maritime use of biomethane and e-methane can scale. A critical aspect is cost competitiveness. Both fuels currently have significantly higher production costs compared to fossil alternatives, with liquefied biomethane recently trading at roughly 3 times the price of fossil LNG in Rotterdam. However, when factoring in reduced compliance costs under FuelEU Maritime and the EU ETS, along with potential revenue from selling surplus allowances, a business case may exist for some vessels, though this remains largely confined to vessels operating within Europe. Supply is another challenge. Global biomethane production is about 7 million tons per year, nearly double its 2020 level, and this could grow to 50 million tons already by 2030. E-methane production, on the other hand, remains limited today, though it could reach about 1 million tons annually by 2030 if production projects in the pipeline materialize. Although these are significant volumes, they must serve multiple sectors beyond shipping, such as heavy-duty transport and power generation. In the end, shipping's willingness to pay relative to other sectors will largely influence available volumes. Infrastructure integration can make a big difference on availability for shipping. Existing LNG bunkering and natural gas pipeline networks can handle biomethane and e-methane without technical adjustments, serving to reduce transport and infrastructure development costs, encouraging further investments. But to fully benefit from this compatibility, low greenhouse gas methane must be allowed to mix with fossil natural gas in the fuel distribution chain. This can only be enabled by a flexible chain of custody model, such as mass balance, which allow for tracing greenhouse gas emissions in the supply chain without necessarily physically separating fuel molecules of fossil origin and renewable origin. While the EU permits mass balancing within the EU ETS and FuelEU Maritime regulations, global alignment remains uncertain, as chain of custody rules under the IMO Net Zero framework are still under discussion.
Although use of low GHG methane in the world fleet is still limited, we noted a strong growth the last year. For example, Hapag-Lloyd will bunker 20,000 tonnes of biomethane in 2025 and 2026. The bio-LNG will be bunkered on board the growing fleet of LNG-capable vessels in Hapag-Lloyd's fleet. This supply has been secured through a tender with the Zero Emissions Maritime Buyers Alliance, marking one of the largest commitments to low-carbon fuels in container shipping to date. Biomethane and e-methane offer promising pathways for LNG-capable vessels to achieve future net zero emissions. By building on today's mature infrastructure, these fuels can play a significant role in maritime decarbonisation. Ammonia is another alternative fuel with the potential to transform the maritime industry. However, it also brings some unique safety and handling challenges that must be addressed. Ammonia is a hydrogen-based, carbon-free fuel that is easier to store and transport than pure hydrogen, with a liquid volumetric energy density that is 50% higher. It releases no CO2 emissions when used on board, with decades of experience handling ammonia in the gas carrier segment and a well-established global supply chain. The industry is well positioned to scale its use. This foundation will be essential as the industry shifts from today's brown ammonia to low and zero carbon blue and green alternatives.
While ammonia faces similar supply and cost challenges as other alternative fuels, it also has some unique safety and handling challenges that must be carefully managed. Ammonia is toxic to humans, so exposure must always be maintained within safe limits to safeguard people on board or those in proximity to the vessel. Therefore, technical safety measures should be integrated into ship design as well as operational procedures with the aim of minimizing and controlling ammonia releases. This includes implementing systems to prevent operational releases of ammonia, strict bunkering procedures based on thorough risk assessments, providing safe havens for people on board where they can seek refuge, and ensuring clear evacuation plans in the event of accidental release. In addition, suitable protective equipment must be available, and crew and onshore personnel must be thoroughly trained and familiar with ammonia-specific hazards to ensure safe operations. The industry is working closely with regulators to develop new safety standards and adapt existing technologies to ensure that ammonia can be used safely as a marine fuel. With high levels of industry-wide collaboration and innovation in recent years, notable developments have been made to overcome these barriers, with significant progress around the technical maturity of engine technology and systems. There has also been a lot of movement on the regulatory side. In the IMO, a first version of interim guidelines for the safety of ships using ammonia as fuel was finalized and approved in 2024. Interim guidelines for utilizing ammonia cargo as fuel under the IGC code were finalized in 2025 and are scheduled for approval in May 2026. The first use of ammonia has been demonstrated by a supply vessel and a tug. More than 40 ammonia-capable vessels are on order, with several deliveries expected in 2026, marking a major step toward an ammonia-powered fleet. Further progress is still needed, but developments in recent years have demonstrated how sharing best practices and learning from early adopters is essential to building confidence in ammonia as a safe marine fuel.
One of the most significant milestones in ammonia-fueled shipping is the Yara Ide, the world's first ammonia-powered container vessel. Developed by Yara and its partners, this groundbreaking ship leverages deep expertise in both maritime operations and ammonia handling to safely transport cargo using ammonia as its primary fuel. With safety at the core of its design and operation, the Yara Ide is demonstrating how the industry can overcome the unique challenges of adopting this zero-carbon fuel at scale.
Alongside ammonia, hydrogen is also emerging as a promising zero-carbon fuel for shipping. Like ammonia, hydrogen, which serves as a foundation for ammonia, can be produced using renewable energy and offers the potential for completely emission-free operations. However, several key barriers still limit its uptake. Hydrogen remains costly and its technologies need maturation in the maritime environment. Storage is a key challenge. Because of its low volumetric energy density, storing sufficient volumes on board is difficult, especially for deep-sea vessels. Safety is another concern, as hydrogen is highly flammable and must be stored at extremely low temperatures in its liquefied form. Despite these challenges, progress is being made. Demonstration projects and technological advances are paving the way for hydrogen to play a significant role in the maritime energy transition as part of a broader portfolio of alternative fuels.
By working together, the industry can unlock their potential of these hydrogen-based fuels while still ensuring the safety of people and the environment. Methanol offers another potential pathway to net zero. It benefits from a growing methanol-capable fleet and established supply chains, but low GHG alternatives such as biomethanol and e-methanol remain much more expensive than conventional fuels, and supply is struggling to scale. Methanol is a sulfur-free fuel that burns cleanly, with very low NOx emissions and almost no soot or particulate matter. Tank to wake, it emits about 7% less CO2 than heavy fuel oil, but fossil-derived methanol typically has higher well-to-wake GHG intensity. For real decarbonization, the potential lies in biomethanol and e-methanol, which both offer near-zero life cycle emissions. This is being supported by established safety standards and growing industry adoption. One of methanol's biggest advantages is its simplicity. As a liquid at ambient conditions, it's far easier and safer to handle than gaseous fuels like LNG, ammonia, or hydrogen. The technology is also mature. Over 100 methanol-capable vessels are in operation, with over 300 on order. Two-stroke engines have accumulated more than 600,000 operating hours, and four-stroke solutions are now entering the market. Methanol also benefits from strong existing infrastructure, with established supply chains and storage at over 115 ports, providing a strong foundation for future scaling.
We see that some key challenges must be addressed before methanol can fulfill its promise as a decarbonization option in shipping. The biggest challenges are cost and supply. Fossil methanol is widely available, but its well-to-wake greenhouse gas footprint is poor. On the other hand, low GHG methanol, such as biomethanol and e-methanol, come at a significantly higher price point, and current supply is limited. The cost challenge is particularly acute for carbon-based electrofuels like e-methanol. Its production requires large amounts of renewable electricity to generate green hydrogen through electrolysis, which is then combined with captured CO2 to synthesize methanol. This process is energy-intensive and capital-heavy, making e-methanol several times more expensive than MGO. Scaling production will depend on massive investments in renewable power
and carbon capture infrastructure, both of which are still developing. Biomethanol faces its own constraints. While it can be produced from sustainable biomass, feedstock availability is limited and often competes with other sectors like agriculture and bioenergy. Logistics and processing costs add further complexity, while its cost is also significantly higher than conventional fuels. Scaling methanol use will require strong, sustained demand to unlock production capacity. Even though the global fleet includes a growing number of methanol-capable vessels, most are dual-fuel and still rely heavily on conventional fuels. Clear demand signals, such as long-term offtake agreements with defined prices and volumes, are essential to give fuel producers the confidence to invest. For producers, the upfront capital expenditure for new plants and distribution networks is high, and the return on investment depends on a market that has yet to fully materialize. Without these commitments, projects will remain risky, and the transition will continue to stall.
In the container segment, ship owners are forming strategic partnership to secure low GHG methanol and accelerate market development. These long-term agreements connect fuel producers, energy suppliers, and ports to guarantee volumes, stabilize pricing, and anchor new production capacity. These commitments reduce investment risk for producers and ensure ship owners access to low GHG methanol at key hubs. By coordinating production, certification, logistics, and bunkering, these partnerships create integrated value chains that support the growing methanol-capable fleet and send strong demand signals that help unlock new projects and scale supply. Methanol offers a practical pathway to lower carbon shipping, but scaling requires bold commitments across the value chain. Through collaboration and clear demand, low GHG methanol can be scaled globally, bringing the industry closer to net zero.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this overview, and a big thank you to all our experts who've taken us through the different options. So I think it's fair to say that alternative fuels are clearly on the horizon, but so much depends on timing, on collaboration, on the right conditions. And yes, as we've just explored, there are also many barriers to overcome. And maybe that's the reason why also alternative fuels are not for everyone just yet. And there is another part of the decarbonization story that we feel we should urgently address. And of course, that is energy efficiency solutions. We will now take you through some interesting technologies and some real life cases. And I'm very happy to hand it back over to Jason for this slot.
Thank you, Anne. So energy efficiency has been a very important part of the shipping industry for decades. And we see the past 2 years, this interest has been constantly rising. And of course, this is connected with more regulation, but also more technological development. And energy efficiency makes sense because in its essence, it reduces the fuel consumption. And by reducing fuel consumption, you reduce operational costs, emissions, and also emissions-related costs. But that's on the short term. And energy efficiency is not only able to help with the short term, it can also be a very good enabler of the adoption of the faster adoption of alternative fuels. As we just now saw in the previous session, one major hurdle behind the wide adoption of alternative fuels is cost. And reducing the fuel consumption would significantly reduce those costs as well. But what does it mean to have energy efficiency? What is feasible from an energy efficiency point of view? This is something that we will try to untackle in this session. And to go to understand what is technically feasible, we need to take one step back and see the theoretical potential. So a few years back, we had a study that estimated what is the potential for the global fleet as a remaining energy efficiency potential. And this is quite a big number. To put it into context, the emissions that we can reduce by utilizing energy efficiency are equal to the emissions emitted in 1 year by 2,500 of the largest vessels or 55,000 of the smallest ones. And this is quite impressive. But again, this is the theoretical maximum. The question is, what is the actual, the feasible potential? And to understand that, we need to take a look at other aspects of the energy efficiency implementation. Starting from the techno-economics and the techno-economic feasibility analysis, we have seen the past 2-3 years that there is an abundance of technological innovation. We see vendors and designers producing more and more technology. This is, of course, good because in that sense, we have more solutions to pick from. But it comes with a negative. And the negative is that we now hear claims left and right, and we need to make sure that we are able to verify those claims and make them part of our techno-economic analysis and feasibility analysis. And beyond that, we also have the implementation. We need to install this technology on board the vessel, and it's not something simple all the time. So I'm quite happy to say that in this session, we will cover both aspects. First, we have Øyvind Sæther, DNV's lead author of this year's Maritime Forecast. We'll have a discussion with Mr. Kim from Hanwha Power, and they will touch on the implementation challenges of how to install technology on the existing fleet and the new fleet. And then Uwe Hollenbach, our leading top-class expert on hydrodynamics, will join us live on the studio along with Jan Oppedal from Odfjell, and they will take us through a real case example of how a ship owner has utilized energy efficiency in practice for their fleet.
Thank you. Energy efficiency retrofits, such as installing ducts or replacing propellers, have been carried out on hundreds of ships over the past decades. The main motivation has been, and still is, to reduce fuel costs, particularly for vessels operating off design conditions. Looking ahead, the case for retrofits could become even stronger. New builds can be costly and involve long lead times, depending on ship type, size, and shipyard capacity. This can make upgrading mid-life vessels a more attractive alternative compared to ordering new tonnage. At the same time, the introduction of greenhouse gas regulations, such as the EU ETS, Fuel EU Maritime, and the potential future implementation of IMO Net Zero framework, can serve to increase both fuel and compliance costs. As a result, retrofits that were previously considered to have too long payback time could and now increasingly become more financially viable, paving the way for a broader range of energy efficiency solutions than before. This backdrop raises important questions for owners, operators, and technology providers. Which solutions are the most promising? What makes a retrofit successful? And how can the industry scale upgrades effectively? To help explore these topics, I'm joined today by Nuno, head of the Marine Solution Business Division at Hanwha Power Systems, a company that provides a wide range of retrofit solutions for ships. Welcome, Nuno, and thank you for being here. I will jump straight into the first question, which is, in your opinion, what are the most important factors influencing the technical and the financial feasibility of an energy efficiency retrofit project?
Hey, thank you, Øyvind. I'm pleased to join this important session. To your question, I think we may divide the retrofit projects by two. Firstly, there could be a kind of mandatory retrofits driven by international regulations, such as WTS or scrubber systems. For these, the decision-making process for the ship owners, I think, is relatively straightforward, and it's definitely cost-driven, with owners typically leading the execution. Secondly, there are retrofits for performance enhancement, I think, such as adding or modifying energy-saving devices like air lubrication systems, wind-assisted propulsion systems, or any kind of hydrodynamic devices. This is the case you asked. For this, I think verification of effectiveness is paramount. While the theoretical benefits are quite clear, the burden to prove real-world gains is on technology providers. I think third-party verification could be also one meaningful approach, helping both parties. I mean, both means the suppliers and owner side. From the perspective of a full EPC provider like us, I think it is equally important to provide intelligent and automated operating systems that can ensure these devices perform optimally under any fluctuating environmental conditions. If it shows practical improvement, everybody can take it. So in summary, the most important factors that influence feasibility of projects are cost and tangible performance improvement.
What would you say are the typical challenges encountered during a retrofit project, and how can they be overcome?
Yes, the challenges vary depending on whether we are talking the negotiation stage or at the execution stage. Until the firm contract made, the primary hurdle is how we can provide the owner with excellence in the ROI. Crucially, the owners need to know if they can recover their capex through adjusted charter rates from charterers. This is already mentioned in the previous subject. And as a solution provider, our job is to reassure the client by demonstrating superior technical expertise and robust project management capabilities. During the execution stage, one of the most frustrating cases I've experienced is discrepancy between the provided as-built drawings and the actual status of the vessel. We've seen cases where some stiffening structures were applied differently than indicated on the provided drawings. If the case is external, visible site, it could be prevented by 3D scanning before detail engineering started. But if that happened to internal structures, I think there is no way but to rectify during the construction stage, means additional cost. I don't know if class of site has some ideas of preventing this kind of issues by any means during the new building stage.
You mentioned costs, and of course, off-hire time can lead to increased costs for the owner. What is the typical timeline of a retrofit project, and what steps can be taken to minimize off-hire time?
Questions. There are many kinds of retrofit projects. I can say some typical cases. For a major project like an LNGC to FSRU conversion, the total timeline is spread about 24 to 27 months, which is from detailed design to delivery. However, the actual installation or construction period, which is more important to the owner, is about 6 to 7 months, I think. To minimize off-hire time, we front-load the design and procurement phases so that construction work begins from that moment the vessel enters the yard. Constant communication regarding the delivery window is vital to ensure minimum lost time. For smaller projects such as liquefaction enhancement for LNG carriers, it takes about 1.5 months. Increasing container carrying capacity by expanding lashing bridges on large container carriers, it takes just slightly over a month. Since these projects usually executed during the scheduled dry docking, simple application of equipment such as PWTS, etc., can be within the scheduled docking period. Anyway, I think we must coordinate firmly with the shipyard and ensure the design is flawless to avoid any rework.
Taking a step back, which retrofit solutions and technologies do you think have the highest potential across the fleet today?
including my own interest in the business, I can say in the short to medium term, we see steady demand for FSU or FSRU conversions of aging LNG carriers. Dual fuel engine retrofits for conventional vessels are also high interest items. Though decision making has been slowed down recently as the owners digest the last MEPC meeting outcomes. We are also closely watching the liquefaction system upgrades for old LNG fleet. And looking further ahead, once regulations become more defined, I anticipate a surge in OCCS installations. For the short sea shipping segment, I'm monitoring the demand for electrification and energy storage system application quite closely.
I think that's all we had time for now. Thanks again to you, Nuno, for sharing your experience and perspectives with us here today. And I will now hand back to the studio.
Thank you very much, Øyvind. That was quite insightful. I would like to keep two elements. One was the extra focus on the ROI and the costs, and actually who pays for that, but also the importance of timeline and how easy it is to implement the energy efficiency retrofits without disrupting the commercial trade of the vessel. But now, I'm quite excited to welcome on stage Uwe and Jan, who will have a very nice discussion about how Odfjell has gone through the energy efficiency journey.
Yeah, Jason, thank you for introduction. Yeah, improving energy efficiency is the key, we've heard already, and Odfjell has illustrated this potential by having achieved a 54% reduction between 2008 and 2025 in the carbon intensity, and is now even pushing further through pioneering work with wind-assisted propulsion. And to discuss this journey, I'm delighted to be joined by Jan Oppedal from Odfjell Management here today. Good afternoon, Jan.
Good afternoon, and thanks a lot for being invited and allow us to tell the story here tonight.
Yeah, let's start at the beginning. 54% cutting carbon intensity since 2008. What would you say were the most effective measures behind that success, and how did you decide what to prioritize?
Yes, I think we have worked along two axes of improvement, an operational axis and a more technical axis. And I think those two are equally important in many ways. On the operational side, it has to do with efficient operation of the vessel, proper weather routing, keeping hulls clean and propellers clean, and it really can make a huge difference. And if you have a fleet of vessels, you really need to monitor this, having good KPIs and making sure that all vessels are operated as optimal as possible. And a key element to do this is to have control on your data and really monitor the performance from day to day and have kind of a data-driven process instead of gut feelings. When it comes to the technical side, I think the project where we have had the largest fuel reductions is on two series of vessels where we took down the design speed from 15.5 knots to 13.5, replacing propellers, optimizing engines with new turbochargers, installing ducts, and took down the RPM of the engines, and it gave around 20% savings, but it was huge investments. Other smaller installations have shorter return of investment, but less fuel cut. When it comes to prioritization between technologies, we try to evaluate what is in the market. We run pilots, and then we evaluate these pilot installations and roll it out if we find out that it makes sense. So yeah, that's basically how we do this from a day to day.
Yeah, this sounds super interesting, but it sounds as well quite complex. And I believe what was the biggest challenge when you faced, which you faced when you tried to roll out these measures?
I think what we have to kind of appreciate is that for crew and superintendents, they have a really busy work on the day-to-day business to operate vessels. And when you come with this decarbonization initiatives on the side, it can be quite annoying on top of everything else you have to do. So I think management support is a key to roll this out at scale. And you really need to build a culture where this emission cuts and decarbonization becomes a core part of the company DNA. And I think we are there now that in Odfjell everyone is pulling in the same direction when it comes to emission cuts. And yeah, it's becoming a part of the job that everyone has to do to try to cut emissions.
Yeah, recently you have fitted the first vessel with wind-assisted propulsion. Can you tell us about any lessons you have learned from the retrofitting process and early operation phase?
Yes, starting with kind of the retrofitting process and the work up till installation. It was kind of a lot of work to be done, but there was no real showstoppers. We found that this was fully feasible to do. We had to rearrange a bit the deck arrangement. We had to move radars and change the radar layout due to blind sectors, do something with the lighting to fulfill Colreg. Of course, it was a lot of welding and stuff to get foundations installed, but everything went quite smoothly. We did this in 2 stages. So we prepared the vessel in China during dry docking and installed sails in Europe in a separate operation, which also went really smooth. And the class process, which was DNV class, I think also we had a lot of discussion back and forth to close all comments, but in the end, there was no showstoppers. On the early operation side, we have now operated the sails for 9 months or 10 months. What we see is that the technology is working. We have very limited downtime. It's also very evident that the sails are providing real fuel savings. We see that from noon data comparing to historical data and also from on-off testing. What we also saw during the summer, both in transatlantic and transpacific voyages, is that there's been limited with wind. And when you sail at 14 knots, the wind from the speed pushes the envelope forward. So the upwind characteristics of the sails seems to be very important to have a high utilization in the routes that we are sailing. Also have some indications that the propeller efficiency seems to be improved by the sail, and also crew is reporting that in bad weather the ship motion or the roll motion is reduced and is more comfortable on board. So the indication so far is that the technology is delivering more or less as expected when it comes to average fuel savings. So I think it's on a positive note so far.
Yeah. Yeah, that's quite interesting that you mentioned the upwind performance for a tanker, because it's believed that this is not so important for slow speed vessels. And as well, interesting that the seakeeping obviously has been improved by reducing roll motions. Let's dig into the energy economics behind it. Can you explain why you think sails are so much more efficient than e-fuels for propulsion?
I think it's a challenge with e-fuels is that it requires a lot of green electricity to be produced. And further, it is a challenge that it's quite energy inefficient. First, you have to make your hydrogen from green electricity. You lose around 30% of the energy. Then you have to make ammonia or methanol for deep sea segment at least. You lose another 30%. And you have to burn this fuel in a combustion engine with the efficiency of, say, 0.5. And then you have the propeller efficiency. So in the end, you end with less than 20% of this green electricity to push the vessel forward. On a contradictory, the sail is on board. You can utilize the wind where you are, when you are there. And of course, there's some loss with these active devices like a suction sail, but anyway, it's very efficient compared to that. And conceptually, I think this makes a lot of sense, that you kind of utilize the wind when you are there. And for kind of the larger society, I think we also have to acknowledge that green electricity is a scarce resource and will be that for a long time. And several studies show that making fuels for shipping is not the most efficient use of this green electricity to reduce emissions. So I think we have a responsibility to try to do what we can now, and that is to focus on energy efficiency and installation of sails and other devices.
Yeah, so this I found quite interesting viewpoint. Of course, this is known that sails provide direct thrust to the vessel. Yeah. But how much lost is on the way from solar power to the e-fuels, that I was not fully aware, I must say. That brings us to your recent demonstrator voyage, which combined wind-assisted propulsion with waste-based biofuel. The results were impressive. Maybe you can say how much emissions you could save. But from your perspective, what were the key takeaways from that trial, and how transferable do you think are these to the wider industry?
I think the key results is, as we already discussed, that on this particular voyage, we saved around 20% of energy from fuel from the sails. It was quite good winds. We used the B100 waste-based certified biofuel with a reduction of around 85% on the GHG intensity compared to VLFSO. And this basically means that we met these IMO GFI requirements 25 years prior to deadline. And it showed us that there is a solution available for shipping right there, right now. And it gives no pressure on electricity and other parts of the society. And it seems to be very scalable. There's a white paper from DNV showing that feedstock of sustainable biofuels seems to exceed the demand the coming years. And we believe this is possible to scale far quicker than other fuel sources. Biofuel has a bad reputation, but with a robust certification regime, it should be scalable right now. And I think it's a kind of last words is that we should be careful not to overcomplicate things and try to use what is available.
Yeah, that sounds really exciting, because it's all there, it's all on the table, and at the end it sounds quite simple what you've done. You just have to do it. Yeah, and with this I hand over to to Anne. Sorry, back to Anne, please.
Thank you so much, Jan and Uwe. Really interesting conversation, and we will actually come back to the topic of WOPs in one of the breakout sessions, actually led by Uwe. So if you have some questions for him on that very topic, you can come back to that in the breakouts. And indeed, a very interesting and impressive journey there shared by Oddfjell. A lot of things I hope that you took away and could learn. And maybe let's just keep that kind of real life technical foundation in mind when we will now try to broaden our view again. So what have we learned so far? Technologies are, of course, advancing quickly, and companies can go quite far with the tools already available today. And still, decision-making does not come easy in an environment that is marked by shifting regulations, geopolitical volatility, and, if you like, incomplete signals from the market. So in this context, we will now try to tackle some of the very, very big questions. Number one, how do you move forward when the future can't be forecast with confidence? And talking about confidence and uncertainty, how much certainty is then enough for everyone to finally act? To explore these questions, I'm now very happy that I can hand over to the moderator of our next slot. Cristina Sáenz de Santa Maria will join us on the line. She's the interim CEO of DNV Maritime, and she will be joined by two senior industry leaders from AET and Let's Go Marine Management for a fireside chat on strategic perspectives in times of uncertainty. Cristina, please.
Over the course of today's discussions, we have heard a great deal about the opportunities and challenges of the maritime energy transition. Presenters have highlighted the persistent barriers around alternative fuels, including viability, infrastructure development, as well as cost and scalability, but also the benefits and cost savings potentials of energy efficiency. We have also heard how the regulatory picture, rather than providing clarity, has in some respects become harder to assess. Following last year's MEPC outcome, many organizations found themselves in a holding pattern, with new timelines difficult to interpret and a degree of uncertainty that has made forward planning more challenging. Taken together, this creates a demanding backdrop for management teams. Decisions have to be made in an environment where the direction of travel is broadly understood, but the practical implications remain unclear. Long-term commitments must be weighted against operational realities, capital allocation, and the risk of acting too early or too late. This raises some fundamental questions for senior management at shipping companies. How do we take strategic decisions in terms of high uncertainty? How much can realistically be planned for, and where can we build in flexibility? And how do organizations continue to move forward when regulatory signals temporarily put parts of the industry on pause? Now, to explore these issues, we are joined by two senior leaders to delve into how they approach these challenges from their perspectives on a day-to-day basis. We will try to focus less on what should happen in theory and more on how decisions are actually being made in practice when certainty is limited, but momentum still matters. It's my pleasure and honor to introduce our guests, Smriti Sharma, Global Director, Strategy, Sustainability and Enterprise Risk Management, AET, and Antonis Georgansis, Chief Operating Officer, Let's Go Marine Management. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let me first kick off with a question to both of you. From your vantage points, does the uncertainty we are dealing with today feel like a temporary phase, or has it become the new normal for maritime leadership? And how does that shape the way in which you make decisions? Maybe we can start with Antonis first.
Yes, Cristina, thank you. Cannot really say that the uncertainty has been a temporary phase. It's been several years now that the whole industry has been looking at various solutions for improving the vessel's efficiency or seeking alternative fuels to propel our ships. Over the last decade, significant improvements have been made in the shipping industry across a broad spectrum and disciplines, driven by the need to reduce energy consumption and subsequently to cut our emissions. We at LATSO have been working from very early on to improve our vessel's performance and optimize the designs within the envelope of the available technology. We do not really support the first mover approach, and we want to make our decisions based on available, tested, and reliable technology. We are not supporters either of the one solution fits all approach for shipping, and we aim for solutions that best fit the specific ship type, size, and trade. We continue with this strategy by working closely with top-tier shipbuilders, utilizing several optimization solutions and various energy-saving devices. We have invested in dual-fuel solutions on high-value vessels, such as LNGs and big LPGs, where we consider it reasonable and prudent to do so, given the cargo usage as fuel and the relatively small ratio of additional capex investment against the vessel's value for making it DF. On the contrary, we have selected conventional solutions for other ship types and opted for ESDs, digital solutions, optimized power plants, sub-generators, reliq plants, sizing, waste heat recovery solutions that overall result in significant savings over standard designs offered from shipbuilders. Smaller vessels like MRs or Ultramaxes and Handys are built for a reason. they visit and serve remote places where the available infrastructure is very basic to support any alternative fuel supply possibility currently and for sure for the years to come. At the same time, the additional capex required for upgrading, for example, an MR tanker to an LNG dual fuel currently stands in the region of 12 to 15 million, depending on the main engine solution you have, and the Type C tanks for the LNG fuel. This figure in today's money represents more or less 1/3 of the vessel's value, and given the level of regulatory uncertainty, cannot justify such decision. On the contrary, it could make sense on highly value ships like VLCCs and big containers that the level of additional investment is proportionally significantly lower against the vessel value, while the trade partner of such vessels could provide access to alternative fuels in the near and not so distant future. We need to highlight as well that any such investment in dual fuel solutions requires ample time and money to invest on, train people, develop the needed competence and skills, both for crew members as well for the office personnel. For Latsko, has been a 5-year journey for coming to the point that we may say with confidence that we have achieved a satisfactory level of performance on the LPG as a fuel.
Thank you, Antonis, for sharing. Very interesting, and I fully agree that shipping is a very diversified industry, and one solution doesn't fit all. Thank you for sharing. Smriti, what about AET?
Yeah. So look, from a shipping industry perspective, I don't think shipping industry is a stranger to uncertainty, right? As ship owners and operators, we continue to operate in this very volatile environment, and it's almost part of our DNA. But I think in today's climate, what makes this uncertainty a bit more amplified is how interconnected all these drivers of uncertainty are, and the pace at which all these disruptions are unfolding, and how difficult it is to isolate one source of uncertainty from another. And just to give you an example, for example, fleet renewal decisions are so intertwined with geopolitics, sanctions, regulatory shifts, supply chain dynamics. So when we look at uncertainty, it's no longer a single variable moving at a time. In fact, everything is moving and everything is interconnected. So to answer your second question, how do we make decisions? Well, you can't wait for all stars to align, right? Because they rarely do. And I think at AET, what is very important for us to have a very clear conviction, for example, when it comes to decarbonization. For us, it's very simple. Decarbonization makes business sense. We have a very clear value proposition for our customers of providing value and quality assets. We provide quality services, safety of operations. And when we look at all of this, when we make decisions at AET, it's very important to have some level of risk tolerance, So how much downside we can realistically manage in our investments, but at the same time, how much strategic upside do our decisions, for example, in DF technologies, unlocks. So when we look at all these criteria, we know at AET we move when we see that the risks are manageable. The direction of travel is somewhat clear, but the choices that we make give us that flexibility so that when the landscape shifts, we are not locked into one decision that we've made. So I think that's how we look at uncertainty and how we make decisions at AET.
Thank you, Smriti, and fully agree. It's what we say in DNV that we are, against some tectonic shifts with uncertain geopolitical landscape and market, the regulatory part, and the technology, right, and how all those are intertwined. Thank you for sharing. Building on both of your answers, since the MEPC October adjournment, have you seen any new or different signals from the market or from your customers? And have those signals led your respective companies to adjust or actually rethink the course of action? Maybe back to you, Antonis.
Yeah. Following the IMO adjournment in October, we have seen a slowdown on the DF orders for vessels that are not gas carriers or large container ships, indicating a more conservative approach from the shipping industry and the need to be sure that such additional investments on dual fuel vessels will be favored by a regulatory framework. We have seen owners that had invested on large tankers and large bulk carriers on dual fuel LNG solutions to return back to shipyards for conventional orders, indicating very clearly that there's a change of strategy. For us at Latsko, we maintain this strategy, explained earlier, until a clear and specific regulatory framework will be in place. If that in the future will require the adoption of alternative fuels, we will always be able to retrofit our existing fleet, given the experience and expertise we have gained from the operation of our gas ships.
Thank you. Smriti, what about you?
Yeah, I do agree with Antonis on this. Christina, if you just look at the order book that we have today, you see alternative fuel capable vessels, and I'm talking about crude tankers, is 14.4% of the global order book. And if we could just compare it to 2024, it was 20%. So if we just look at these percentages, we can see a clear slowdown in commitments for future fuel tonnage. So to me, that reflects that we are at a point in time where the industry is recalibrating after the MEPC delay. So potentially, other ship owners are becoming more conscious about locking themselves in a single pathway or a fuel system. So at 80, we believe that the industry will have a shift towards a more pragmatic way of looking at decarbonization. And some of that we are seeing in our customer conversations as well. So, for example, the latest customer conversations that we are having, it's about how do we make the investments, for example, that AET has made in DF technologies more equitable in terms of risk and reward. So working with our customers in that space. So there is a growing interest within our customers, for example, where there is an option for them to preserve their flexibility. But at the same time, there is some traction that we are seeing, for example, in profit sharing models for these DF ships, options for fuel cost sharing, pay as you save models for DF technologies. So what it does for owners such as AET, where we are very much driven by the future, where we want to future-proof our fleet, where we want to see and reduce the risk of stranded assets, for example, we see that this is a way for us to share the decarbonization benefits with the customers while still generating some meaningful returns on a DF investments. So you see these models or these conversations with customers are there because they match the moment. So it is about allowing progress without locking in assumptions that may change in the future. So I think this is how we are seeing probably the conversations with customers changing. But at AET, we continue to be driven by decarbonization. We continue to be driven by a conviction in this space.
Thank you, Smriti, and very interesting. I'm very glad to see that there's progress in those, maybe business models, and I guess, building, as you say, pragmatism and flexibility, right, of what how the future might look like. Yeah. So that's great to hear. I'm going to stay with you, Smriti, because AET has publicly committed right to long-term decarbonization targets and invested in dual fuel pathways such as LNG today and ammonia looking ahead. From an operational and strategic standpoint, how do you decide when to move ahead with this kind of investments, and when does it make more sense to actually pause and preserve some optionality?
Right. A very, very meaningful question, Christina. So, you know that AET has been on this energy transition journey for almost 10 years now. When we ordered our first LNG DF ships, at AET, we firmly believe in our net zero 2050 targets. Today, AET has about 13 existing DF ships. We have 4 on order book, and we have 3 ammonia DF ships on order as well. So collectively, we have about 17 DF ships, both existing and in the pipeline. So almost 100%, not almost, in fact, 100% of our order book is alternative fuel. So when we look at the decisions, I think there are three things that clearly stand out when we look at our investments. So one is very important is the customer and market alignment, right? I mean, that's where we are here. We are here to serve our customers. And throughout our journey at AET, we have built these very deep, long-standing relationships with our customers. And we believe that these partnerships are quite key in terms of how we develop our future products and services. And we advance when we, in our investments, when we see very clear contracted demand from the charterers that supports our business case. And we recognize that such investments does require an appropriate level of risk on our side. And of course, obviously a return of an appropriate, reward of an appropriate level as well. So that's the first, making sure that, we are working closely with our customers and there is a product that helps them meet their needs. The second is, of course, technology and ecosystem readiness. So LNG is a mature ecosystem. It has proven engines, bunkering infrastructure, safety frameworks. So that allows us to invest with confidence. Ammonia is progressing, and we are tracking very closely, improvement in the safety, regulations, bunkering, infrastructure availability, and OEM timelines as well to make sure that we are able to deliver these vessels to our customers. And the third very important part is the risk management and future proofing. So when we invest, we invest with that whole point that we want to reduce the risk of stranded assets in the future. We want to keep multiple future pathways open. And DF technologies are central to that approach because they allow us to operate efficiently today. And while at the same time we are preparing for tomorrow. LNG is a very good example in this case and how we are kind of future-proofing, our assets. It's available at scale today, and it can evolve into a zero carbon solution over time. So there is a potential of LNG, infrastructure developing, and it is in many ways already happening towards bio LNG and ultimately towards e-LNG. So there is a pathway available, which is credible and flexible as well. So for us, when we have to make choices, we do want to avoid locking ourselves into highly uncertain outcomes. So we work with solutions where there is credibility, where we are working closely with the customers, and where we again make sure that we can manage the risk and have strategic upside for these decisions.
Thank you, Smriti. Changing a little bit from the decarbonization topic and more into the digitalization, right? And the development of those type of technologies. Anthony, Slatco has placed a strong emphasis on digitalization, right? And data-driven operations. In a period of high uncertainty, as we are living now, investing heavily in technology can feel risky for some. How can digitalization help bridge the gap between those long-term decarbonization ambitions and the day-to-day operation decision-making? And do you see some specific technologies or solutions as really sound investments today, regardless of how the regulation will evolve?
It is true. It is true that we have heavily invested in digitalization and targeted on having data-driven decision-making over the last years. We have been privileged enough to have all our ships built to our specifications from top-tier shipbuilders and selected makers of the highest quality. We specify our ships from the contract stage with enhanced onboard coverage, thus enabling high volume and high accuracy data acquisition. Data collection systems are installed and enable data transmission ashore for achieving online monitoring for the onboard of processes and operations. We have established a dedicated department within the company, comprising from highly skilled, highly educated and competent personnel that is responsible for the performance monitoring of the fleet. Infrastructure for the necessary collection, processing and data visualization has been set up for several years now. Data integrity, being of the highest importance, had to be ensured. So we aimed for an independent third-party verifier, an accreditation body, certifying our processes for making sure that everything we do is right and correct. In-house software applications have been developed for monitoring and evaluating the vessel's energy demand, environmental performance, versus the optimum operation of the vessel for the given moment. Data-driven preventive and corrective actions like underwater cleaning, power plant operation, shaft generator utilization, and so many others are all resulting into significant savings, but also contributing for changing the mindset of the crew members and people on board on how the system and the vessel should be operated. KPIs have been established and visualized both ashore and on board for providing real-time decision-making. Such developments have also benefited further the company by enabling us to have real-time CII performance monitoring, as well as our exposure to EU ETS and Fuel EU. Of course, as part of this journey, our company's processes and procedures had to be amended and re-engineered for adopting this new way of operation, having seamless and automated workflows and eventually improving our efficiencies. Through this journey, we have established partnerships with major manufacturers and classification societies with a goal to move away from the traditional way of doing things and take advantage of the technological achievements that enable us to guide our specialized resources where is mostly needed and produce the highest value for the company. Coming to your question on bridging the gap between long-term decarbonization ambitions and day-to-day operational decision-making, the way we have developed our systems and processes provide the basis for a continuous improvement of our operations, not only on the hardware, the vessel and the systems, but also on the software, the people, changing the mindsets, moving away from non-optimized practices that all of us tend to follow by habit, simply because we found them that way. If I can say, if I'm allowed to say, it assists breaking the eggs and becoming more efficient and effective through change. Regarding the point of certain technologies being sound investments, regardless on how the regulatory framework develops and evolves, we would certainly support digitalization ESDs of proven performance for the specific ship type, size, and trade, and selectively consider proven and reliable dual fuel capabilities for high-value vessels. We would not support at this stage some of the exotic solutions that have recently emerged into the market and are not yet proven on a large-scale basis.
Thank you so much. And I fully agree that I think to adopt these new solutions and technologies, partnerships and working with other relevant stakeholders in the industry make a lot of sense. Now, we are getting close to an end, but I would like to hear both of your views before that on looking at the next year, next 12 months. Do you expect more clarity, particularly around the IMO's direction, or are management teams just likely to still be navigating a similar level of uncertainty? And in addition, more importantly, what does meaningful certainty actually look like from your perspective? Maybe we can start with you, Smriti, and then over to you, Antonis.
Sure. Thank you. So, look, if you see the conversations in the past 6 months, conversation around carbon pricing and climate policy has hardened, that trend is likely to continue this year. So especially if you just look at IMO net zero framework, and if you're going to get any certainty around that, I don't think so. So you see the whole truth about shipping is that we continue to operate in a very uncertain environment. So I think that certainty will be there. It'll continue to be a very uncertain world. But at AET, I think look, one kind of certainty that truly matters in this environment, at least for us, is that, again, we work closely with our customers. We know what our customers want. We continue to strengthen the relationship that underpins our business, continue to work with our partners, with our employees and our crew at sea. So I think the whole certainty is about delivering and continue to deliver at AET a value proposition that meets our customers' needs, continue to operating safely and reliably. And I think that's very important, the certainty around that, continue to operate our operations with full safety, reliability. At the same time, we continue to invest in assets that offer flexibility and optionality as well. And we spoke about the DF investments that we have made. And for us, we continue to make decisions for the long term. So yes, I mean, in the short and medium term, uncertainty, a lot of hurdles, but we are here for the long game. We are here for multi-decades. For our products continue to offer that. So I think that's important. At the same time, again, for AET, we are very much focused to continue to strengthen our balance sheet, continue to operate with the pedigree that's required to deliver consistently in this very complex environment. And I think that's the kind of certainty we can control. And I think that's the kind we are committed to delivering.
Thank you so much, Smriti. I think very good points on, continue to deliver what your customer wants and certainly not compromising on quality and safety. Anthony, back to you very quickly. What's your view on that?
After October, we have been listening to many and very diverse views on the future of NZF, depending on which part of the world the voices are coming from. I think today we cannot be in a position to know if this will be adopted or not, and if it does, what will be the requirements that will follow. Until then, we navigate based on the strategy already explained earlier, and we invest in technologies and solutions that will deliver high efficiency gains, irrespective of the fuel in use, providing proven certainty. We cannot base our decisions made today and subsequent investments, especially considering the level of CapEx involved for some of those, to an uncertain and undecided regulatory framework. So we continue along these lines.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you both for a very open and insightful discussion. I think we could have stayed with this interesting discussion for hours. But we need to leave it and start closing up. And thank you for sharing as well how decisions are really being made at management level and not just like how they look on paper. It's been extremely valuable to hear both the strategic and operational perspectives in a time where certainty is limited, but action is still needed. And with that, I'll hand it back to Anne and Jason in the studio. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina.
Thank you.
Agnes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christina, and thank you to our panelists for this very interesting discussion. Apologies for the small connectivity issues there. I think the connection may have been a little bit bumpy here and there, but I hope for your understanding. This, of course, happens when you try to connect people from across the globe. And nonetheless, I think it was a very pertinent discussion. And if anything, I think you've given us a clear view of how industry leaders kind of navigate uncertainty in real time, if you like. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, a final time now to shift gears, and we will now move from strategic perspectives to practical solution-focused deep dives, because now it's time for the breakout sessions. Let me explain how this now works. So for the remainder of the events, you all get to pick and choose a topic that you find most relevant. So we offer 4 breakout sessions, and you will just head into the one that you find most interesting. Each session is led by a few D&V experts, and there will be an opportunity for you to, listen to them, to kind of real cases, concrete demonstrations, projects, practical guidance, you name it, and you will also get an opportunity to comment and ask questions. And to access those breakouts in a moment, you will need to press the button called Sessions in the menu on the left-hand side of the streaming window. But bear with us for a moment, because first of all, Jason will take us through the options.
Yes, of course. So we have 4 options. First, it's the Alternative Fuels Insight with Christian Hammer and Nathaniel Fritjof. They will touch on this leading platform that we have, that I mentioned earlier, where we monitor all alternative fuel capabilities globally, from production facilities, bunkering, and usage on board. Then we have emissions compliance, lessons, and cost control with Helge Hermusgaard. This session will touch on the very increasingly complex aspect of emissions management. Then nuclear propulsion, emerging technologies and business models with Ulle Reistad, a topic that has been receiving quite a lot of interest and it has becoming hot the past year. And last but not least, wind-assisted propulsion systems, predict, verify, and achieve with Uwe Hollenbach, where he will touch on the practical aspects of how to assess the wind-assisted propulsion systems for your fleet.
Thanks for that. Very interesting selection of topics. So I hope you find something that caught your eye. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up. That's what I wanted to say. This wraps up the main program here on the main stage. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you for being here with me today, Jason.
Thank you as well. It was very nice to be here.
And let me try and sum it all up for you, because I think if anything, one thing today has, one thing that's really become clear is that the challenges, of course, are very complex, but the solutions are real. And if anything, all of our D&V experts are here to support you all the way on your own decarbonization journey. Now, if you want to dive deeper into any of the topics that we've addressed today, of course, I highly recommend that you go to our website, to dnv.com, where you will find a wealth of information, of course, about, a wide range of maritime topics, the services that we have on offer. We have a growing portfolio of white papers mentioned already today, also linked in the chat, on literally every alternative fuel and energy efficiency solution you can think about, the maritime forecast, many things. So highly recommend that you go there. And for anyone who missed part of the program, or if you're interested to replay one or the other session of our event today, of course, a recording of today's event will also be made available very, very shortly. And then a very final comment from my side, if I may. Before we move into the breakouts, a small request from our end. As you know, all of our D&V events are free of charge. But if you found today valuable, you can really do us a favor, because we'd sincerely appreciate a small token of support to a cause that's very close to our hearts at D&V. Support to the mission to seafarers. Many of you will be familiar with the mission. They provide essential assistance to crews around the world. And maybe kind of circling back to also what Knut said in the beginning in his opening keynote, it's the seafarers out there that really will need to make the transition happen. So even a modest contribution can make a real difference, and you will find a link to the donation page right now in the chat. And we very much thank you in advance for your generosity and support. And with that, we call it a day here on the main stage. Enjoy the breakouts, everybody. Thank you again for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you again at another D&V event very, very soon. Until then, take care, stay safe, and goodbye from the studio.